Well, it wasn't very pretty, but K-State is a winner 24-14 on Senior Day over Colorado, battling some snow early on, and then the wind really stiffened up right before before halftime started. Really, it was pretty regular throughout the second half. It was tied 7-7 at halftime, maybe shades of the Army game in there where K-State pretty lethargic on offense. It's low scoring. The opponent gets a score right before the halftime break, and you're going, oh my gosh, this is a game when it shouldn't be. Fortunately enough, K-State was able to lock down things a little bit better against a lifeless Colorado team. Who would have expected Deion Sanders to not be a very good college football coach? I don't think anybody saw that coming. So K-State is able to pull it out in the end with a 24-14 win over Colorado to finish 6-6 in the regular season. That means whether you like it or not, you are going to be watching K-State play one more football game this season. My best bet would be the Independence Bowl in Shreveport a month from tomorrow. December 30th is when that game will be played against a team out of Conference USA. Get excited, folks. Mason Voth, KSU fan, Drew Galloway here with you for KSO Postgame Live, our final time this regular season for football. Same stuff, different day for this team, pretty much. Obviously, the offense gave us a little bit of a curveball last weekend with what they did in Salt Lake City, but they returned to their true form this year, which was maddeningly inconsistent, and that included not throwing the ball once on first down in the first half. They did it in the second half, started to open things up a little bit more. The run game looked atrocious early on. Then Joe Jackson broke free in the second half and had another 100-yard rushing game and put together ultimately a really nice day running the football for K-State. So, Drew, you got to see it on TV, which always lends different views and insights than what we get in the stadium and on the field. So what were your takeaways from K-State's 24-14 win over Colorado?
Yeah, the first thought probably is it was a frustrating game. It was frustrating in the sense that it was the most predictable outcome for this season was that K-State was probably going to struggle for the first half. Probably unexpectedly, though, was Colorado putting up as much of a fight as they did. I mean, we talked before we started recording that Colorado probably played pretty hard for about 35, 40 minutes. And then when K-State scored to go up 14-7, you could kind of tell that took the wind out of their sails a little bit. But frustrating performance, kind of fits the theme of the whole year, though. Didn't play well for a lot of the game. Had some maddening play calls on both sides to where it's like, you can't do anything offensively, so you want to bring in Blake Barnett on a 3rd and 4 in the first drive of the second half. And of course, it goes nowhere. A bad play call on defense is why Colorado scored, because you allow a 37-yard play on 3rd and 17 on a screen. It was just kind of like the epitome of the season, except K-State still found a way to win. So in that standpoint, it was good to get the 6th win, good to, it wasn't a complete failure because you hit your benchmark of going to a bowl game, but still a failure in terms of going to Arlington and, maybe playing in a good bowl game, playing in a college football playoff even. So that part is a failure, but you at least got to 6 wins. And then just, Joe Jackson has had one of the crazier 2-game turnarounds from an entire season that I can ever remember. He almost has more yards in the last 2 games than he had the entire season up to this point. And, don't look now, but he only needs 105 yards to go over 1,000. Who would have guessed that? Probably 2 or 3 weeks ago that Joe Jackson might run for 1,000 yards this year. So that turnaround has been impressive. And, again, they keep finding ways to get off the field and not allowing points on defense. That's what's wild. Again, it was a little bend, don't break, kind of wait for Colorado to make mistakes type of day on defense. And against a terrible offense and a terrible team like Colorado, that's going to happen. That. It was actually impressive that K-State was able to get off the field so many times on 4th and short, because you're in 4th and short, I think 4 times, and Colorado didn't get any of them. So that was good. Ryan Davis's development over the last handful of weeks, outside of just a terrible penalty last week, has been good to watch. But I mean, it happened. They won.
And also, it wasn't necessarily his fault, but Ryan Davis did have another 15-yard penalty that extended a drive in this game as well, with the face mask early in the game. But yeah, just, he somehow keeps finding 15-yard penalties out there. I don't care if it's intentional, unintentional.
I'm not blaming him for the one today.
No, but when you've done others, you can't, you don't get that grace. Chidobe Iser gets flagged for a BS roughing the passer call. Going to give him a pass. You know why? Well, it was a terrible call, for one. And number two, I haven't seen Chidobe Iser go out and try to kill an opposing player in a game this season. So, K-State defense, this is why, I get people can be frustrated with Joe Klanderman. He hasn't been great. The overall numbers in different metrics cannot look fantastic, but most of the time we've looked at it and said this defense has done enough to get off the field, hold teams to field goals. They forced an insane amount of turnovers this year. So, if there's one area you'll live with, it's that. And because his defense, his side of the ball is the one that came out and looked like they gave close to a full 60 minutes today, and haven't had a ton of games this year where I just go, oh, nope, they're not giving it to you like you want. They were bad in the second half against Iowa State all the way back in game 1, no doubt. But I don't think it was from a lack of trying. They gave the team a chance to win in Tucson when the offense, I think, just wanted to sit on their hands the whole game. So very rarely do I feel like the defense came out and didn't try their best. Now they have to get better, and that's going to tie into some of the stuff we'll talk about in a little bit in regards to what needs to happen moving forward. Fan, what were your takeaways from how K-State played today?
I thought the game kind of reflected the season, kind of what Drew said. But at the first half of the season, K-State was 2-4. First half of this game, it was a 7-7 lead, and the offense had 3 poor drives to end the half. The defense gave up a touchdown to end the half. Just not very good in the running game. I thought it was kind of overthinking the game with so many formations with 6 offensive linemen. K-State, I think, thought, well, let's come out. Let's be the more physical team. Let's just load up the box and run down Colorado's throat. And it didn't work. K-State had 3.1 yards per carry in the first half and a 17% success rate in the running game. Second half, first drive, not so great, but then some adjustments. We start throwing a little bit on first down. Finally, we start running a little bit more out of 11 personnel or 12 personnel with one of the H-backs or tight ends split out. And then all of a sudden your running game gets going. Second half, over 6 yards a carry, 61% success rate in the running game. And you score over 4 points per possession in the second half, 4.25, which is what I expected them to do for the game. They ended up at 3 points per drive for the game and a 42% success rate at 5.5 yards per play. So decent job. Defense, I thought, gave up some yards in the middle. We've worried a little bit about Salter in the quarterback run game, which he did get a few plays on K-State. Drew mentioned the screen pass before halftime, which was atrocious, to let them score on that drive after you get a big sack and have them in 3rd and 17, I think, before that play. And then the second half, you did give up. You thought for a moment K-State gets a 10-point lead and immediately gives up a drive to cut it to 3, and then the offense has to go back on the field. Too many times we've seen that before this season, in even the last couple, with 10-point leads in the fourth quarter that you give up, and that the offense responds, and really Joe Jackson responds. Like Joe Jackson, I think, had 6 carries for 60 yards on that drive to go back up by 10. K-State, again, some good adjustment, back to zone, running scheme, and Joe Jackson was just cutting back to the backside because Colorado kept over pursuing on the backside of the zone running game. And then K-State got a couple inside runs to get that last touchdown to go up by 10 and put the game away before the defense gets off the field, and then K-State runs out the clock. So, again, this is a disappointing season. 6-6 is what nobody wanted. You were hoping for at least 9 wins overall, at least 7 wins in the league. That's what the standard has to be for this team in this league. They didn't get there this year, but the last half of the season, you go 4-2. The 2 losses are to 2 of the best 3 teams in the league. Even with blowing a game last week that you should have won, if your defense can get a stop in the second half against Utah. So, again, not what you wanted, but this is better than alternative. I'd rather win the last game and be bowl eligible than be 5-7 and join our brethren from Kansas in being not bowl eligible for a second straight year for the Jayhawks. So, again, that's not the standard. Our standard is not to be better than KU. Our standard is to be in Arlington, and we didn't get there for the 3rd straight year, which is not where this program needs to be. We need to step it up next year, but I'll worry about next year. This year, we'll see what happens, where K-State ends up bowling, and what this team looks like going into that bowl game as well.
Well, yeah, and Avery Johnson didn't throw an interception in the end zone driving to go up by 2 scores, and he didn't throw a pick 6 to lose the game either. So you got that going for you, which I look really smart because that was my what to watch for today on Power Cat Game Day. So it didn't happen. K-State won. I might be a football genius. In terms of stuff pertaining to this actual game, because I think so much of the conversation tonight is probably more about big picture because, again, this game really didn't matter. Last week against Utah really didn't matter. Nothing has really mattered this season since, essentially the loss to Baylor really knocked you out of it. But, we're smart enough to realize that when a team loses to Army and Arizona, they're not going to be good enough to win in the Big 12 like K-State was supposed to. So this team in the first 5 weeks of the season set themselves back by losing to Iowa State, by losing to teams that they should have beaten. And then, they let one slip against Baylor. And from that point on, nothing really mattered. Admirable that they were able to claw to 6-6. Like we've talked about in a lot of circumstances, you would rather them keep playing than not. There's a reason why, I've referred to this as K-State, hitting the Mendoza line in college football. That's really what 6-6 is. When Nicky Lopez was slapping 200 around out there for the Royals, I'm not going, oh, he's hitting the cover off the ball right now. I'm good with it. But there are a lot of people that will live with weak hitting defensive-minded outfielders or middle infielders because you can get something out of it. And so, you get the Mendoza line 200. In college football, it's 6-6. Yeah, you weren't a total failure in terms of how the totality of college football looks at you. But internally, most programs, 6-6 is really bad. Now, when Chris Getz would hit 200 for the Royals, I go, how about that? What a season from Getsy. Go Big Blue. Tough loss for the Wolverines today. But that's where K-State is here. 6-6 is not good this season. They could have gone 8-4 and it wouldn't have been good. They had to be in Arlington this season for it to be anywhere near a success, and they just came up short once again in making that happen. But in terms of this game specifically, Joe Jackson had another nice day, turned it on in the second half. Drew, what do you make of the late season turnaround for Joe Jackson, and how realistic is it that this is more than just kind of a flash in the pan and that you're going to get a better version of him next season?
Yeah, it is very fascinating because, like I said before, I've never seen a 2-game improvement this drastic in a long time. He's not going down at first contact. He's running really hard. He's getting more yards than are blocked for him, which, beforehand, I kind of said that he was a low ceiling, high floor type of running back because if the blocking is good, he gets the yards that are blocked. Well, the last 2 weeks, he's been really good at getting yards after contact. Had one play where he had 6 or 7 yards after contact in a moment where K-State really needed it. Going forward, I'm torn. I don't really know what to do with Joe Jackson, the running back position. I think that you want him back, and you want to pair him with somebody that is older and has more experience because, again, we still only saw Antonio Martin as the only other running back to get a carry today for K-State. So like you still need a little bit more in terms of depth. And if that person can come in and really push Joe Jackson, maybe you have like a legit 1-2, great. But it's clear that you need more than just Joe Jackson. And it kind of, I don't know. In this sense, this is just total speculation about everything, but it makes you wonder if like post Dylan Edwards and everything happening, if the rallying cry for the offense and for the offensive line was just like, let's rally around Joe Jackson, because you don't have the last 2 games without a lot of like belief and confidence in that person. So I wonder if that's something that has kind of played a part in it. But the fact that he has been so good over these last 2 games and really taking that step in terms of yards after contact makes you think that, okay, maybe you can go into next year with a transfer or a JUCO running back plus Joe Jackson as your 1-2. And then, maybe you hope that one of the younger backs or Antonio Martin keeps developing and takes another step, so you have a third if you really need it. But it is something that is really noteworthy and makes the offseason very fascinating, because beforehand, I would have told you, maybe K-State needs to go and get 2 transfer running backs plus a JUCO running back, because Joe Jackson was statistically having one of the worst seasons by a starting running back at K-State in a long, long time. Well, now you're in a situation where he could be 1,000-yard rusher, and you want to have that and bring that back. So it makes for a fascinating discussion in the offseason of like what really happens at the running back spot. But I can all but guarantee that at least one older body will be added to the running back room. It's just going to come down to like, what does that look like from a stylistic standpoint and from like a talent standpoint? Is this going to be Joe Jackson's the 1 and then a transfer of the JUCO as the 2, or is it going to be like a 1A, 1B type situation?
I don't think you can roll with banking on Joe Jackson being your number 1. I think at worst, it needs to be a 1A, 1B situation for him next year. I don't think you can bank on one game and then playing a bad defense and committing to it. Maybe that's all it took for K-State, but it wasn't like it came easy today, and it happened once K-State was finally able to wear him down. And Chris Klieman talked about in postgame, like they've got to get better within the roster in terms of being able to sustain any problems that might pop up. And they were bad at that this year. And so to me, you can't roll into next year and Joe Jackson be your best running back by a wide margin. I think you're going to have to go out there and find somebody that is hopefully at a more proven level than him. I don't care if it's at a lower level, but I want somebody that feels like, okay, there might be something here. And, if Joe Jackson's your number 2 or they're splitting carries next year, I'm fine with that. And that's where it would have been interesting to see ultimately what the split would have looked like this year if you had a full season of Dylan Edwards and Joe Jackson together, just to kind of get an idea of how that would have played out. But yeah, I don't think you can roll with that one moving forward.
No.
Right? You're going to have to add somebody into this mix.
You have to add somebody, and you probably want that player that you add to kind of be like that Dylan Edwards-esque type of like the scat back that is really fast and can go be your change of pace back as well. Like you need to go replace what Dylan Edwards was supposed to be in some sort of the imagination.
Yeah. One of the other things, and I'm asking these questions, is set up some audio that will play from Chris Klieman here in a few minutes, about a 3-minute stretch from the press conference where I asked him what I thought were pretty important questions as the season came to an end. So, Fan, I'll ask you, since you're kind of our scheme guru here, what do you make of the first season with Matt Wells as the offensive coordinator, his brother Luke as the tight ends coach, and Brian LePack shifted to the offensive line, and all 3 of those duties seemed to slide back in terms of production and how fans felt about their performance this year. So what do you see from those 3 areas of the K-State coaching staff and what they produced after a full year in those roles?
Clearly, the offense was a disappointment. It's going to finish ranked maybe in the 40s, 50s in the metrics, which is not where you want to be. I think the offensive line struggled for much of the year. Had a decent second half today, a good game last week against Utah. But most of the year, this team struggled to run the ball, which has been the identity for Kleiman teams, to run it first and then use that to enhance and set up the passing game, which was not the case for much of the season, and helped lead to the disappointment with the 2-4 start, especially losses to teams like Army and Arizona at the time, because even though they finished strong, they're going to be a ranked team. When we played them, I think they weren't very good.
We know they're still a terrible team.
And then the loss to Baylor. I mean, there's 3 disappointing losses there. And even looking back, Iowa State ended up being, although they were healthy when we played them, they ended up being kind of a mediocre team as the season went along as well. So you got that. Tight ends have underachieved compared to expectations. Too many drops, too much inconsistent blocking. Saw that a little bit today, although they were man down with Garrett Oakley not playing much. So that wasn't great. And again, that's not the standard. The offense needs to be ranked in the 20s at least, in my opinion. Need to be more efficient. And, the one thing the offense did kind of generate this year is explosive plays. Some of that was Jace Brown. Some of that was the one game where Dylan Edwards kind of played healthy. But they did generate a few down the stretch here in these last couple of games. And Joe Jackson got going a little bit. So there's some signs there. But, again, we got to see it more consistently. It's just not enough to be a Big 12 contender. It's enough to be a 6-6 or 7-5 team, but that's not the standard for this program right now. So there definitely needs to be some introspection in looking at the staff and what they want to do going forward with those 3 spots. And, Mason, you've said multiple times, and I kind of agree with you, is, if you do make a change at OC, that's another OC change, which even though you may want it, that's not ideal. To change offensive coordinator that many times over the last several seasons, it doesn't do anybody any good, especially if Avery Johnson is coming back, which, most people think he will right now. So what do you do with that? That's part of it. Then, what do you do with an offensive line that wasn't very good this year, although you lost the key guy that never played, that before the season most people thought would be the best guy we had? And then what do you do with an offensive line group or tight end group, H-back group that wasn't what you wanted it to be? So definitely something that's going to have to be thought about going into this offseason as Chris Kleiman and makes those decisions on what he's going to do with his staff.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, here I'm going to play Chris Kleiman's post-game press conference. I not just because they were the questions that I asked, but I think they are the most important 3 minutes from the press conference because it didn't have anything to do with the game. It had more to do with this big picture stuff that we're talking about. So here is Chris Kleiman after the game answering some of these questions. Before the season, you guys were picked to make it to Arlington. Don't do it again. Slide back to 6 wins. What is it that you think has held you guys back these last 3 years?
One, it's why we don't have polls anymore for starters. I know that everybody's an expert as far as knowing how everything's going to finish up and stuff, but nobody picked Arizona State last year. Everybody picked them last, and they ended up getting to it. Everybody picked them and us this year. And the parity in college football is really, really challenging right now. And this league is really good. And to find ways to win games, and guys, we can go back and say, yep, we should have beaten this team, we should have beaten this team, we should have beaten this team. We didn't. We were in one-score games and didn't win those one-score games. If we win those one-score games, it looks a little differently. For starters, we've got to find ways to fill the roster up better with more options when we get guys knocked out like we did. I mean, we don't have another Jace Brown. And Sterling Lockett was really good today. He got one of our hammers. Sterling came up big time today. But Jace is so different. We don't have another Austin Romaine. We got to move Dez inside. It's hard when you lose some of your best dudes. But lo and behold, we got to go back to work and find ways to get over that hump, and continue. But that's everybody in the league that's in a price tag like we are. There's only a couple of them that are unlimited price tags.
So, for a lack of a better term, in your opinion, do you think college football is turning into more of a crapshoot than the best programs are going to win?
No, it's the most money that's going to win. The team that's got the most money should win right now until we can get that thing squared away. And guys, I'm going to go have a beer here in a minute, so we ain't going to get on a soapbox right now. But you guys are smart enough to realize the ones that have the most money have the best players, and they're spending 40 and 50 million. The ones like us that don't, man, we got to scratch and fight and claw like a lot of the other ones to try to get in position to be successful. And until it changes, and I don't know if it'll ever change, the rich are going to get richer.
To the effect of the stuff that is part of that problem, weird to have to ask this, but do you anticipate guys like Avery, Jace, Lincoln, some of those guys being back next season?
I sure as heck hope so. I don't speak for them, but let's let them enjoy this. It's the end of the season is always emotional for kids, and so we won't do a whole lot with the guys this week. We need to let them have some air and breathe, and then we'll have those conversations.
All right, last one for me. I'll stop. For 12 games, first season, and new rules for Matt Wells, Luke Wells, Brian LePack. How would you evaluate the whole season for those three guys?
Yeah, I'll do that at another time.
So there you go. That was Chris Kleiman there, answering questions, maybe not actually answering in the way that people would like or prefer, but that is to, what I always point out. That's how coaches roll. That's how they do this. And really the only part that truly bothers me about how that was handled, because it goes pretty much to how this goes. We are not stupid in what we do. And so for Chris Kleiman to hit us with that's why we did away with the poll. Well, I'm not an idiot. I know how to read. I read Brett McMurphy's story that he did at Big 12 Media Day, where he talked to every coach in the Big 12 and got their input on who they thought was winning the league and who was playing there. And that informal poll that the Big 12 didn't do, but Brett McMurphy did, told me that everybody thought K-State was going to be the best team in the league this season. K-State was picked to win the league the most. They were picked to be in Arlington the most. And we aren't the only ones that are, quote unquote, so smart to know who's going to be there at the end. The coaches also got it wrong. And my question is, why would the smart people, the ones getting paid millions of dollars to lead these programs, be so misinformed about how things ended up? But obviously, in that moment, it's clear he wasn't going to answer that question. So that's the only one that I just go like, oh, I get it. It's set up so you can skirt around it. But like, we know that the Big 12 coaches thought K-State was going to be the best team in this league. And so for the third straight year, you underperformed. And you shouldn't need a poll if you're Chris Kleiman to realize that your team failed the last three seasons, because 2023 coming off a Big 12 title with your quarterback back and enough pieces, you should have been, look, it was a disappointing 8-win season. That loss to Iowa State is in there. They dropped the ball against Texas. They dropped the ball against Missouri. All that stuff is there. Last year, obviously, they collapsed in November, and this year, the entire season was a collapse. So that's where, that's where fans look and they want a little bit more accountability than it's not just Chris Kleiman that does this. All coaches do this. And even when they give their version of accountability, fans still hate it because he's just saying that to say it. He doesn't actually mean it. So that's my takeaway from that.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's probably about the only part that I had that was like, yeah, I could kind of go without that answer. But like you said, you kind of did set it up for it to be answered in that way. I think it's fascinating that this isn't the first time he's kind of talked about how they need to recruit their depth over the last month. So I'm interested to see what that looks like. And I mean, we haven't done commitment videos on them, but getting two JUCO guys that are highly ranked is a little bit fascinating to me, because it means that you're probably saving a little bit more money and can kind of improve the roster in a little bit of a Moneyball-esque type route. But he's not exactly wrong with what he said about recruiting right now, that a lot of the teams that have more money are getting better players. And if you have better players, you typically win a lot more, especially in this league where it is so tight that if you have the best players, you're probably going to win and have the most money. So he's not really wrong in that standpoint, but I'm more interested on what they're going to do to fix it. And we saw a little bit with the JUCOs. does this mean that you go for more towards like a better fit and more like intangibles than like higher ranked players out of the portal? Like I'm fascinated by what that's going to look like coming into this off season. But maybe the most fascinating part of that press conference was the lack of an answer for what you laid out about both Wells's and LePac, because I think that's going to be something to really kind of monitor. Of like, he didn't really give an answer about that, and I mean, I am willing to give Brian LePac a lot of grace for this season and how it all kind of played out, because had to deal with something in August that you didn't really account for. And it's a unit that I think has gotten better than they were to begin the year. But, you know, you're still kind of getting play calls that don't really make a lot of sense at times. You're getting play calls that like are just, it's 3rd and 6, you're throwing 2 yards. And then the tight end room has seemingly gotten worse, even though they returned everybody and added the highest rated player in program history out of the recruiting circles. So that is a little bit interesting to me of how he went about it. I know that he wasn't really going to say anything, but with how quickly he said that he would evaluate that on his own time was a little interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answers were pretty standard for what you said, Mason. Most coaches are going to give you a lot of those answers. I thought you gave him some good questions, knowing probably what he was going to say to a lot of those, especially the coaching staff stuff. Like, he's probably not going to air that out publicly at this point in time. But I agree with Drew. I think the main answer you saw that was the most telling was, we've got to get better players. Like, eventually, you know, that's ultimately the truth of what every team needs, is you have to have better players. You have to have more depth. Good players make coaches look a lot better. That's just the facts. And you can scheme a lot. And there were plenty of issues I had with scheme this year, but there was plenty of times where it didn't matter what you call, you're not going to get much if you don't execute better and don't have better players. So it goes both ways. I think they do need to look at how to get better. I mean, you look back on this season, there's over 20 drops that I counted just looking through the stats that I have right here. That's way too many. You can't afford to have that many drops by your receivers and your tight ends.
I would be curious. Do you have the number in front of you that is a tight end drop?
I'd have to go through and look. I was just looking through total. I mean, today you had 2 drops from Tibbs, so those were 2.
Ancio had one.
They called that a pass broken up, but yeah, I agree that was a drop. A lot of times your PBUs could be drops as well, although that's a judgment call. It's kind of like a quarterback hurry. But regardless, I think we saw too many of that, because I think the wide receiver room, when healthy, lived up to its billing. It just wasn't healthy all but 1 or 2 games. The tight end room did not live up to its billing. Offensive line did not live up to its billing. I think Joe Jackson eventually showed up, and I'll give him credit for these last 2 games, but again, struggled. He's got 48% of his yards for the season last 2 games. So give him credit for that, but in the middle there, not enough runs over 20 yards, which we saw a little bit more these last few weeks. So I just throw all that together kind of in a pot and see where this team does need to get better on the margins. We've talked about special teams plenty this year. I think the last 2 weeks was kind of a neutral in for special teams, but it's going to end up being the special teams that's ranked in the 80s or 90s in the metrics, which, if you're looking for those areas where you can get an edge for a program like us that maybe doesn't have the best talent, maybe doesn't spend the best money, special teams is an area you can do that with. In case they didn't get that done very consistently this year, your best special teams unit was your kicker, who had a pretty good year, had us kind of a surprise. But after that, you had a kickoff return that the coach said was maybe a reason we lost the game. So what do you do with that at the end of the day?
That they showed a highlight of in the middle of this one
Yeah.
and like propped it up and like, why would you show a play that lost you the game? They're trying to silence me in here apparently because the internet crapped out for a second. So sorry if it impacted anybody's watching or whatever else. Hopefully you were able to hear fan keep going. And to the point that Chris Kleiman had about the NIL thing, yeah, it's true, but not to like Texas Tech is going to be really good for a long time, I think, because of their money setup. I don't know that I've seen it proven yet that anybody else has it better than like worlds better than K-State for it to make a real difference.
No.
And K-State as a program has always had like inherent disadvantages that you've been able to overcome. Now in the new Big 12, you don't have those disadvantages anymore as much. The new disadvantage isn't that it's OU and Texas that can get the 4 and 5-star guys. It's that Texas Tech can get them because of money. You still have to be able to go out and find the guys that you can lift above it. And some of that has to come down to the coaching has to be to a different level than what you're normally accustomed to. But I will say this, I did hear one thing yesterday, and I don't know how on the market is, but it would seem to make some sense that there might be that Chris Kleiman understands and values where the NIL can drive this thing a little bit more than some other people that can make decisions in the athletic department, and that there might be a little bit of a divide and a lack of understanding of just how far you need to go. Like, is the 20-some million that can be distributed internally for NIL, the revenue sharing, is that enough? Do you need to go beyond that and be securing bigger, more lucrative deals through something like Wildcat NIL? I think Chris Kleiman believes and knows that you do have to try to do that. And I think there are some other people that may not be as strong in that. To you asking, Drew, this was prior to today, but K-State 22 drops as a team, 6 from Garrett Oakley, 3 from Braden Lofton, 1 from Will Swanson, 1 from Lincoln Cure, 1 from Will Ancio, credited to everybody in there. So you can do on the math on that, but that's north of double digits. And we talked about it on the show somewhat recently, but K-State's tight ends are easily the most in the country in that category. So not great.
No, that is really, really bad. And I mean, I don't know. It is going to be a push to get more money involved in the roster construction because that's just what it is now. But I'm still really curious about the how of all of this. And I mean, it makes for what next year is really like that make or break because, you know, as we said last week, and we said multiple times now, Chris Kleiman's coming back next year, and everybody's just got to deal with that. Like, it's now going to be, if he doesn't get to Arlington again, there's going to be a lot more questions. If there's no staff turnover, I think there's going to be a lot of questions before the next season even starts. Nobody has to be satisfied. We're not telling you to be satisfied with this game or this season or really anything right now. It's just, it is what it is. They went 6-6. It is somewhat still kind of like noteworthy to me, at least, that you can start 2-4 and finish 4-2, and your only 2 losses are to the team that is far head and shoulders above what everybody else is in the league. And then you blew a 10-point lead at Utah last week. So that is something. It becomes a little bit of a question into like next year and how everything goes of like what Mason pointed out earlier this season is, can you win the 1-score games? Because this league is so tight and has so much parity of who can beat who on any given day that sometimes just winning the close games is going to get you 11-1. Or, I mean, in Houston's case, it felt like Houston, outside of last week when they lost to TCU, won every single 1-score game that they played in this year, and that got them to 9-3. Like, can you find a way to close out the games that you need to, or just, you know, not blow double-digit leads in the fourth quarter? Because it's crazy to think about, but like with how this season started and how it went, that K-State was not blowing a lead in Waco and not blowing a lead in Salt Lake away from still going 7-2 in the Big 12.
Yeah, and you would have put yourself into a tiebreaker scenario with BYU to see how it would have played out.
Like the margins are just that thin in this league.
But that goes to, I talked about it after the loss in Waco. Chris Kleiman has been one of the worst coaches in one-score games over the last 3 seasons in the Big 12. So that's significant. You got to learn how to win those games. A team like Houston did this year, and they went 9-3 because of it, because they beat Oregon State by 3, Arizona by 3, Arizona State by 8, UCF by 3, and Baylor by 7. They went 5-1 in one-score games this year. Like they are a one play away against TCU last week from being in that 7-2 type of range. So I don't know. We'll see how things work out and look for K-State moving forward. Now, on the changes front that needs to be made, obviously one of the topics is going to be what players come back. You have a couple of very high profile, big name, talented players in the mix there. Avery Johnson being your quarterback. Even though there can be debates about his effectiveness at times, I still think you would be crazy to turn away from him next season. He's been good enough this year. I think most of us would agree that the offense as a whole has been the problem. And if you think that Matt Wells is bad, or the O-line's been bad, or they couldn't run, or the tight ends have dropped balls, well, then what's the quarterback supposed to do there? I do want to play this, though. This is from Avery Johnson's post-game. Wyatt Wheeler, the K-State beat writer for the Capital Journal, clipped the audio asking that came off a question asking about Avery Johnson's future with K-State. So I'll get that queued up and we'll play that here for everybody just to, I guess, give some insight on how that all went down. So here is the thoughts from Avery Johnson on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, just being a Kansas kid, coming to K-State and playing for Coach Kleiman has been great up to this point. And like you said, there's going to be question marks and this, that, and the other. And I mean, obviously, there's things that are going to be taken into account, but there's no doubt in my mind I want to play for Coach Kleiman, and this is the place I want to be. But just things I got to talk to my family about and pray about. But yeah, like you said, I mean, I'm committed to this place, and I love this place more than anything in the world. So definitely something I'm just gonna sit down with my family about tomorrow.
So there you go. That's what Avery Johnson had to say, which I get people pointing out and saying, well, there was a lot of things that would lead to being pretty committal in there, but then it ends with got to sit down and have that conversation with my family tomorrow or anything. The general vibe that I've got through the season is that he will be back. What he said last week after the loss to Utah, today after the game against Colorado, leads me to believe that there is a very good chance that he is back next year as the quarterback at K-State.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's some pushback out there from fans, but I think you keep a talent like that in your program. I think K-State on offense, the top 2 priorities are him and Jace Brown. Like, you got to try everything you can to keep those 2 players because they're your 2 most dynamic players. I think Joe Jackson would be a distant third. And Fitzgerald on the offensive line coming back and playing a season, if he's lives up to the hype of being the best offensive lineman up front, would be the 4th that I would point to. Then you got plenty of other options after that. But every year, that's this area of college football, that's going to be your thing. You got to recruit your own players every year and bring back the best players. And I think those are 4 of the best players on offense for this team coming into next season. Although I agree with you, Drew, I think you do have to add an additional piece in the backfield for the running back spot. But yeah, he made as positive a statement as he could without being definitive and completely committal. I understand that. Like, he's going to check out his options. That's what he should do in this area. I can't blame him whatsoever for doing that. But I do think he genuinely likes Coach Kleiman. I definitely think he wants to play for him. but I do think he probably wants to see the plan as well for what this offense
Yeah.
can look like. Because he has to know the offense has to be better for this team to be an Arlington type team next year.
Yeah, and while it would suck and everything to lose that, and we know obviously the investment that K-State as a, the athletic side and the resources they've put into it would stink to lose out on that. And on the fan side, like, he was supposed to be the guy. He's supposed to be the one that leads this thing to where you want it to go. And like, there's a part of me that, and I'm not as much like sentimental fan anymore, but like, I would much rather see it happen with Avery Johnson at quarterback, because it is the story that you want to sell there. And because if he's made it through 3 different coordinators and then he decides to come back again, you want to see it happen. But yeah, you can't be, overly committal in this day and age. And like, I think that's just a guy that's being more careful than anything with it. But also at the end of it, like, nobody should be faulted if they want to leave this program after what's taken place this year. Couple it with the November that happened last year. If you've been here the last 2 years, I can't say anything bad about you if you decide you want to leave, because the suggestion would be that things aren't going to be better next year. And that's what this team and staff is really going to have to sell and make clear. Like you said, Fan, how is it going to get better? Like, are you actually going to be able to analyze that there were problems and that there were things that came up short and led you to not hit your potential? Because to me, like, and this gets into the conversation I want to end on with staff changes and stuff. If the exact same coaching staff is in place next year, this team will not be good. I will say it throughout the entire offseason, and I will just bank on us next year after Game 12 having the conversation that either Chris Klieman already coached his last game at K-State or it needed to be his last game at K-State. This team has to be good next year, and not just good like they have been, not this year, but the 2 years before. They have to be really good and a legitimate contender in the Big 12, and if they're not, everybody's got to go. But some people have to go. Some people needed to have coached their final game in Bill Snyder Family Stadium wearing purple. Now you can go to Lawrence and you can be like dog crap for them. I don't care. Sign me up, whatever. But nobody should. This whole thing should not stay together next year. And like we've laid out, the problem here is you're in a situation where, like I said, Matt Wells probably not going anywhere. If Avery's back, you can't give him a 4th offensive coordinator in 4 years. You are setting him up for failure in that regard. And I just don't think that's a move you make. Those are outside of Chris Klieman. That's going to be one of your higher paid guys on the staff. I don't think Joe Klanderman has been so bad that you get off that. See, he knows the league. He's been able to get, I think, quite a bit out of guys. So I think those, Kleiman and the coordinators, I don't think you're going to see changes that get made there. Beyond that, I don't think anybody should feel comfortable outside of probably Brian Anderson, who has, overseen 2 of the best running backs in school history outside of Darren Sproles since he's been here. They've done good things in kind of replenishing, and Joe Jackson obviously finished things off pretty strong. But outside of that, like, I don't know who else should feel comfortable. I really don't think it's anybody. So you can start, thinking through that, but changes have to be made. This cannot be the same thing next season.
Yeah, it was kind of something that we talked about, that before the season I could go one of 2 ways. When you have a staff that, you have a lot of the same people around, and especially defensively, it either goes in a way of like, okay, everybody's steering the boat in the same direction, like it's going really well, or like sometimes it can kind of fall apart on you, like it has a little bit this year. Chris Klieman's a smart guy. I think that he knows that things need to change. Kind of get similar vibes a little bit to like what he said post-game today to 2021 after the debacle on Black Friday in Austin. Kind of get a little bit of a similar vibe of like, that's somebody that knows that he has a huge offseason ahead of him.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's see. Jared says new QB coach ? Well, Matt Wells is the quarterback's coach. So, I mean, in theory, if you were reshuffling things, you could take less off his plate there, and maybe you do make an adjustment. I don't think that will be in the cards. I think it's going to come in other places. Now, look, I've got no problem like putting my thoughts and my statements on the record here, and this isn't necessarily me trying to call for anybody's job, but like I said, changes have to be made. Somebody's got to be those, and there's a lot of guys on this staff that have been in place a long time. One area that I think has pretty relentlessly been a little bit of a disappointment, and we've talked about the lack of interceptions this year. I think you have to look at corner and think about making a change there. Van Malone has overseen the corners for a long time. The high school recruiting hasn't gone very swimmingly there. It's been a lot of transfer attempts for K-State in that position. Zayshawn Rich looks like he might be able to take a step next year. He's only a sophomore, so you're going to be able to maybe have some things. But overall, I don't know. And it's clear that the Luke Wells situation at tight end didn't work out. Obviously, he's the brother of Matt Wells, the OC. So is that a change that actually gets made? I don't know. But it's definitely one that I would seriously consider if I was Chris Kleiman, because you were supposedly going to have a really good tight end room. And to me, they're one of the bigger disappointments this year because of all the key drops that stick out. That this team went 6-6. There's a really good part of me that thinks that you take some of those drops away in the right situation, this team at least has 2 more wins. And again, 8-4 doesn't make this some, happy-go-lucky season for K-State, but it's not as big of a disaster as 6-6, where this was the ultimate failure. This was a bad football team we had to watch all season at K-State.
Yeah, I think, those are the things that are going to be the tough decisions in the offseason for sure for Chris Kleiman to make. The Wells brother connection makes it maybe even more complicated. I don't know. But I agree with you. I think you got to look at all areas, see who really wants to still be here. And I think you got to find some guys that can help you recruit not only high school kids, but in the portal. Like, I think there's a dynamic to finding guys that can help bring in portal guys from other teams and help you make them fit as part of your group and part of your staff. I think that's the thing about Texas Tech. They spent the money for sure, and the money makes those guys happy, but they also brought those guys together and played really well together on both sides of the ball. So I give credit where we're due on that one. So, and you got to look at BYU, who I don't know that they have a ton more talent at K-State, but what are they doing that makes them so successful the first 2 years in the Big 12? Like that team has been pretty consistent for 2 years in a row, and has guys.
And Bear Bachmeier's not like anything special at quarterback. They just run him nonstop, and they get, like LJ Martin's been the best running back in the league, probably. They have one receiver, Chase Roberts. K-State has one receiver, Jace Brown. Like, you're right. Like, I don't know what the big disconnect there is. Like, they've got the money in basketball. I haven't seen it on the football field.
Yeah, and even you look at Utah, you went from probably the worst offense in the league last year to the best offense with Dan Pierre as your quarterback. Like, he was nothing special, but they made it work. Like, I give them credit. They have 2 NFL draft picks on their offensive line, and they have the best offensive line in the league, and that was a big part of why they were successful. But still, that Utah's not a team that's – they're more talented than K-State, I think, overall, but they're not Texas Tech level as far as what the money they're spending goes. And they just had a team that came together better to finish out this season and be an 10-2 team. So besides Texas Tech, Kleiman's point about spending money, I think Texas Tech's in a league of their own as far as who spent the money in this league. I'm not sure about the other teams that are up there at the top of the league that they spent anywhere close to what Texas Tech spent.
Arizona State didn't break the bank last year to have Sam Levitt, Cam Scadaboo, and Jordan Tyson be their best guys. Like, they found cracks in the system, and they found a guy in Cam Scadaboo that was really good for that level, and they hit on it. They found it in Sam Levitt, and then he probably got a pretty penny this year, and he's about to kind of screw him with it would appear to turn his back on him, but whatever. And then Jordan Tyson, he was a Deion Sanders reject, and he ended up down there, and they figured it out. So, yeah, it's Texas Tech has a lot of money, and they've proven, like, that's how you jump the line and not do a lot of the work, because we saw what happened when Joey McGuire had to do the work. They were disappointing every year. That people gave after that first year, there were high expectations. And it was flop, flop, flop. And then all of a sudden, here comes Cody Campbell with all of his money. And, oh, what do you know? They are the best team in the Big 12. Because when you spend like an SEC or Big 10 team, really more than a lot of those, I think, then, yeah, you should rip through the entire Big 12. So that's where, like, I understand, like, it's true, but that's not really the point here. And like I said earlier, K-State's always had inherent disadvantages. You now just have to be able to overcome them in a different way. And, you know, the depth on the roster thing, you're not going to fill out your depth by giving $1 million to every player. Not everybody's going to be highly paid. It's how do you go into the bargain bin and find the hidden gems there, or the guys that can fit and do what you want, or guys that aren't going to poison the water hole. How are you going to make that happen? G. Flu said, what makes Mason think that changes will be things will be better by keeping our OC and DC? Any lower coaching position changes matter very little. I'm not saying that I think things will be better. I, again, am just speaking in the basis of reality, and I think people confuse the reality of the situation with how I believe things to be. Drew, DY, Fan, Chris Kleiman, not going anywhere unless he decides to. Matt Wells, not going anywhere. Joe Klanderman, not going anywhere. So
I'll also say position coach changes do make a bigger impact than you think. It gives new ideas, new scheme, new personnel. Maybe you develop somebody that the previous coach
new mentality, new technique. I mean, think how many times with the corners we've talked about, like, they're not turning around trying to make plays on the ball. And we saw it today. It burnt Zayshawn Rich. He got flagged for PI on one. Then the one later in the game they didn't call it, I thought was more PI than the first one. And the corners only ended up with, 2 picks this season? Oklahoma State, and then today Donovan McIntosh came down with one. In the last, what would that be? The last 17 games of K-State football, corners have accounted for 3 interceptions. That's really bad. Like, and this is a defense that had a lot of takeaways this year, and the corners weren't really doing anything about it. So, yeah, the position coaches matter a little bit more. And I would tell you this. I thought when Luke Wells was hired, I was like, okay, whatever. I don't care. Like, yeah, it probably doesn't deserve to be here based off his actual resume. He is Matt's brother, whatever. He'll listen to him. He'll do this, whatever. It can't mean that much at tight end. Well, the tight ends were atrocious this year. So I have to assume that the difference was that they weren't being coached by Brian LePack and that they were being coached by Luke Wells, because the tight end room didn't get worse. It should have gotten better. You threw Lincoln Cure in there, and they were noticeably worse this year with how they did things. So they can make a serious difference in this, but like, that doesn't absolve Chris Kleiman. He's the one that's hired these guys. It's still a reflection of his program. It's just now he has to be ready to chop the head off the snake. And if he's not, then K-State's going to get bitten by it once again. They're going to have a bad year next year. And like I said, we will be sitting here 365 days from now, and I will be telling you it's time for Chris Kleiman to be done as the head coach at Kansas State. And just because I'm not saying that, he needs to be gone right now, doesn't mean that I don't think that it would be in the best interest of K-State to maybe restart right now and get the refresh. But I know it's not going to happen, so it doesn't do any good to discuss those situations. We have to handle this with the information and the knowledge that we have moving forward. And that's why after last week, I was encouraged by the performance they put together in Salt Lake City when they should have gotten run out of the building. There was no reason that team should have competed the way they did. That was a positive sign. Alarming how the offense started in the game today. Chris Kleiman admitted that in postgame. They picked it up at the end. They got it moving in the right direction. So that's why this stuff, I think, really, really is significant. Houston Cat says you can tell the people who don't remember K-State before Bill Snyder, a fan base that is upset about making a bowl and only being truly outplayed by one team, spoiled. Yeah, look, here's the deal. I was born in 1998. So for somebody that's 27 years old, going to be 28 when the next football season starts off, the only thing I've known is a high standard for K-State football. And as the years keep going by, the standard for K-State football is going to keep moving, because there are going to be less and less people that were alive or had gone to college by the time that Bill Snyder had arrived. So if you're still thinking in the mindset of, oh, well, K-State sucked for a long time and then Bill Snyder showed up, we would have killed for 6-6 back in 1986. It's not 1986 anymore. And we have 3 decades plus of this being one of the better and more consistent programs in the country. And when you have a team that has been built up and been as successful, the standards change over time. So, you're right. Maybe we are spoiled in some way because you can look around and see other programs that don't get to do some of the things that K-State does consistently, but that's because K-State has higher standards than those programs. KU's fighting through that right now, where they should be upset they didn't make it to a bowl game. Lance Leipold came in, changed the standard. They don't expect to go 1-11 every year now, and they're in this area where they're fighting. The standards change for people, and the standard has changed for K-State a long time ago. So if you're my age or people older than me, 98, Snyder was hired in 89. You went to the first bowl game in 93. So anybody in their mid-30s, the standard their entire life has been that K-State's going to be good. K-State's going to compete at a high level in most seasons, and 6-6 isn't good enough. Because you know what 6-6 did? It got Ron Prince fired. It got Bill Snyder shoved out the door at the end. All right. We'll end it at that. We'll have plenty of post-game conversation or, longer drawn-out stuff throughout the week, throughout the offseason, which will be coming. Signing day is this week. Drew and I will have a lot of stuff from that going on for K-State and everything that takes place with that. Expect next Sunday, I would bet that K-State in the Independence Bowl down in Shreveport on December 30th. So, if you book a hotel room, if you're going, don't blame me if it ends up being somewhere else. But Independence Bowl rep was here today. I think K-State is fighting pretty hard to make that be the option because of timing and just different location than where they've been. Certainly nobody wants to go back to that dump known as the Liberty Bowl. So, expect Shreveport, Louisiana, and we'll see you guys down there if that's where it ends up being for K-State. Somewhere else, we'll be there as well. Basketball this week, Monday against Bowling Green. We'll have coverage from that. K-State plays another power conference opponent next Saturday at home against Seton Hall. So a lot still coming on the basketball and football front. So we are out of here. For Drew Galloway, KSU fan, I'm Mason Voth. Thanks for watching and listening to KSO Postgame Live. Head on over to On3, find K-State Online, and you can get a little bit more postgame reaction and long, drawn-out thoughts about what's to come this offseason for K-State. I would also tell you, if you aren't a member of KSO, you might be able to go find some deals out there right now. So go on the hunt for that. Head over to KSO and On3, and we'll talk to you over there on the message boards.